Yesterday, farmer Mark Davis committed a crime. So did pensioner Liz Baker. And restaurant owner John Eschler, for him Sunday was also a day of crime. Shop assistant Betty Levine has already gone to jail for a similar crime.
I expect the police will come and arrest me today, and I think anybody that would happily go to prison is a bit of an idiot. Obviously, I'd rather not. I'd rather spend my 2 weeks on holiday somewhere, but I'm quite resigned.
Tonight, after a weekend of arrests throughout the country, World in Action examines the lives of the Wirecutters. It was here on the North Cornish coast that Betty Levine committed the offence that put her on the road to prison. She cut this fence, the perimeter wire of St Morgan's Airforce Base near Newquay. It's home for RAF Nimrod anti-submarine aircraft, and it's also an arsenal for British and American nuclear weapons.
I don't consider the fence has any right to be there. It's a fence that's been put there without the consent of Parliament or the consent of the British people.
Betty Levine is one of a growing number of people who have joined Operation Snowball, a new anti-nuclear movement which believes it has the right to break the law. Its members face prison and the stigma of a criminal record.
I came to Falmouth about 10 years ago. I think many people see me as a little obsessive, a little eccentric even. Think that my attitudes are very one-sided. That's changed in the last few weeks due to the American bombing of Libya and the Chernobyl accident. Now people are coming up to me in the streets and saying, "Oh, we understand what you meant."
Betty Levine made her symbolic cut in the wire last September. She and 26 others had made a point of warning the police in advance of what they were about to do. Betty and the others were arrested and fined £50 for criminal damage.
The government has a right to make decisions which the British people have democratically voted that government in for. Most of the decisions that I'm objecting to have never been voted on by the British people at all. Trident was never discussed in Parliament, let alone by the British people, nor was Cruise.
This weekend saw the biggest turnout of the Snowball campaign so far. Hundreds of people gathered to cut the fences at 20 nuclear bases around Britain. In the days leading up to the protest, we've been examining the motives of some of those prepared to break the law and of an opposing group dedicated to stopping them.
Next weekend, they're now going to do another similar demonstration with hundreds of people right the way across the country to go to American bases and demonstrate, cut the wire for what they believe is a kind of an act of conscience.
And do you think that's going to help this country to protect itself?
How can it possibly? I mean, to my mind, it is such naive thinking.
Lady Olga Maitland is the arch opponent of the Snowball campaign. At the RAF Club in London, she hosts a cocktail party as part of her campaign of opposition. One of tonight's guests is John Stanley, Minister of State for the Armed Forces. Lady Olga's group, Families for Defence, is fervently anti-communist and strongly disapproves of Snowball.
I think that the people who do this are not only offending against the law, but they're also setting a terribly bad example for the young generation.
They're restricting the freedom of other people to go about their business, then that is not good, because in a democracy, everyone should be free, and not only in politics, but in other aspects of their lives.
If you don't have the law upheld, then you have anarchy, and then the whole of your moral character, your will to protect yourself, dissolves.
It's terribly sad. I mean, they've just been so badly advised and just led astray on one particular subject. And they've only got to have a good leader. If you've got a good leader, you can make anybody do anything, be a hippie or a wire cutter or whatever.
Lady Maitland has made sure that protesters at previous Snowball actions have had more than just the police to contend with.
Well, I very much hope that you will understand that you are only supporting a very minority point of view. The vast majority of the people in this country do support NATO. They are horrified about these planned acts of, frankly, self.
In this Snowball operation, the former chairman of CND, Monsignor Bruce Kent, was arrested. However, Snowball has developed separately from CND.
The Snowball campaign began with 3 of us coming to this peace corner here and cutting the fence.
Angie Zelter started it all. Together with two friends, she first cut the wire of their local Air Force base, RAF Sculthorpe in Norfolk, 2 years ago.
I was fed up with going along to London to demonstrate with thousands of other people being totally ignored, signing petitions, going to Greenham, and for it being ignored. And I felt that we ought to, all the people that felt like I did, should be actually able to be in a campaign locally, and for that to grow and to actually affect the people around us.
To the Wirecutters, Sculthorpe is typical of what's wrong with Britain's defence policy. It's jointly used by Britain and America under an undefined agreement. It's used by nuclear strike aircraft. But unlike CND, Snowball doesn't want one-sided disarmament. It wants the government to agree merely to one of 3 requests.
The first request is that they should vote in the United Nations for multilateral nuclear disarmament. The second is that they should publicly encourage the nuclear freeze proposals, and the third is that they should take any independent step towards reduction or freezing nuclear weapons, like getting rid of Trident or sending crews back or something like that. So very reasonable requests.
Before this weekend, more than 1,000 protesters had cut the wire. 915 were arrested and 100 have been jailed for refusing to pay their fines. As the name suggests, the Snowball campaign is supposed to roll on, picking up more people prepared to break the law until the courts are no longer able to cope.
I think that we're not breaking the law, that the government's breaking the law, that they're breaking international laws, which are very major, and our whole protest is to get the discussion into the courts, whether they allow it or not, because it's actually difficult to get that argument heard, but so that we can actually discuss our defence policy and show that it's actually in breach of international laws.
Back in Cornwall, justice continues to take its natural course. Betty Levine has refused to pay her fine. The magistrates gave her more time to pay, but finally ran out of patience and decided she must now go to jail.
Today I expect them to arrest me.
How do you feel about that?
I'm quite resigned now. They've been threatening to arrest me for some months now, and I've worried about it in the past. I've got to the stage now where I'd just like to get it over with.
Once you've had the experience of prison, do you think that that will affect your views?
I've been campaigning on nuclear topics for 10 years. I can't see that 10 or 11 days in prison is going to wipe all that out.
So when you get out of prison, what will you do?
Well, it should be just in time for the next Snowball campaign event at St Morgan, so I hope I'll go straight there.
And when you get there, what will you do?
I'll be cutting the fence, I hope.
So you're prepared to go to prison yet again?
Yes, of course. I think it's the only thing I can do.
Betty Levine was met by police as she left the shop and was taken to Pucklechurch Remand Centre near Bristol. She didn't know if she would be out in time to repeat her offence at the weekend's demonstration at St Morgan. A big turnout was expected, attracting people not normally associated with nuclear issues or law-breaking.
See that old snowball go rolling down the hill. He's getting bigger and stronger every day. Tell all your friends and neighbors, come and push it with a will. And the old snowball will roll your blues. Old snowball's gonna roll that bass away.
This is the song we wrote when the Snowball campaign first started.
Simple. Our requests are plain. Our requests are 3 in number.
John Eschler was the manager of a large department store in Leeds until he quit to bring up his family in the quiet of a Devon village, where he runs a restaurant. But he didn't find peace of mind.
You drive down the coast a short way and you come to Morwenstow with the huge listening discs there on the North Cornwall coast. Further down the coast you come to St Morgan, and that's only 70 miles from here as the crow flies. And St Morgan, it turns out, is a huge store of nuclear depth charges and nuclear bombs. So the existence of those weapons of mass destruction alongside this glorious Devon and Cornish countryside seems totally unacceptable.
When John Eschler opened his restaurant, he was not interested in nuclear issues. But now he's become deeply involved in organising the local Snowball campaign. There has been a mixed reaction from his largely well-to-do clientele.
Some people obviously are turned off and stop frequenting this establishment. They're foolish because they're missing a lot of wonderful food and good company. But nevertheless, it has that effect. But obviously, I win a few and gain a few. Some people are enthusiastic, but are unable because of their profession or personal commitments to take part in this type of direct action.
Why is it, though, that you're prepared to take the risk of actually harming your own livelihood?
If you look at the possibility, perhaps, of doing something about this arms race spiral, about not spending all this money on armaments, feeding a few of the children that are starving throughout the world, just giving my own children a slightly better education by providing adequate resources, providing a few kidney machines. So many causes that need expenditure, too many to count and list. If just a small fraction of the arms race is halted, a few bob is spent in a decent direction, and if my cells graph ceases to rise at this sort of angle and evens out a little bit, then it's extremely trivial in comparison. So I'm prepared to do it.
I'm sure people say to you that while they have no doubt that you truly hold the beliefs that you do, but why do you have to break the law to show it?
Well, of course, that's the big heartache, isn't it? That's the great difficulty. That's what causes the family debate and discussion and the slightly sleepless and worried nights. Should you break the law in order to pursue a particular viewpoint? And it's a matter of balance. I think on balance, you should. It all depends on the law, of course. If, for example, in pre-war Germany, you'd harboured a Jewish family and saved them from the concentration camp, you'd be breaking the law. What sort of law is that?
I'm a born protester. And if you do feel strongly, you work your anger about what's going on by becoming active. It's the only way to do it. I couldn't come out of it.
Pensioner Liz Baker began to protest against nuclear weapons 38 years ago. She's 68 and lives in Devon.
At the end of the war, we were also going around with buckets of paste under our Macintoshes, slapping up notices saying Yanks out. That I was bringing up children after that, and I didn't get involved until the Older Marston marches. And our schoolboy sons, 3 of them, and my husband and I were involved in all except the first one. My husband had become one of the replacements in the Committee of 100 when Russell and 5 others got arrested. So I was in the environment for it. There seemed nothing else to do, you know what I mean? There was no alternative. So we started our non-violent direct action as far back as that. The early 60s, we were sitting down in outside bases and in Trafalgar Square and getting arrested.
Prominent among speakers in the square was Canon Collins. It was said that the anti-nuclear arms protest was the biggest political movement to spring up since the end of the war. At 88, Bertrand Russell campaigns as fervently as ever. At Easter, something for everybody.
We'd like to have spent our Easters doing nice things, gardening or going away, but there's no alternative. There was the action, therefore we wanted to be part of it. And the same with the sit-downs in London. And it's why I'm doing this now. I'm retired and I should, you know, I don't want an ordinary social life. I must stand up and be counted.
Last week, Liz Baker was preparing to break the law at this weekend's Snowball protest. For her, this is just the latest in a long line of anti-nuclear campaigns.
We say that if within 3 months the government just conforms to one of the principles of it, we will stop. But in the meantime, they haven't, and we go on, and we hope to get a very big action on July the 6th.
I wasn't a member of the ND. I didn't really like joining movements. I'm not a member of any political party. But I felt that the time had come when I needed to become involved.
Mark Davis is a farmer and beekeeper in mid-Devon. He first became involved when it was announced that cruise missiles were to be based in Britain.
I've joined the Snowball campaign because I think that that commitment is important. It's important for your children. It's important for the environment. It's finally come to the point when we have to do something. The 3 demands I found very mild. If it means getting arrested to achieve such mild aims, then I'm happy to.
3 months ago, Mark Davis took part in his first Snowball campaign. He was arrested.
The farmers don't see me as a criminal. They see me as a protester. I went to a civil defence meeting, and the civil defence organiser for the area was telling the farmers what to do during a nuclear attack. And one of the first things he said was that you get your cows and you put them in, the lanes are very narrow lanes with high banks. You put your herd in a lane, you put a tarpaulin over the top of them, then you go into your shelter for a fortnight, and then you come out again and carry on as if nothing had happened. I mean, given that it's safe to come out anyway after a fortnight, and given that the cows are in any fit condition, The farmers rolled about. It was so obvious that the government hadn't a clue what it was talking about. Beekeeping in this country is on the verge of being completely uneconomic. It's a very marginal occupation. In the event of nuclear war, no bees would survive at all. I find that a terrible thought. The Chernobyl meltdown was, in terms of a war, tiny. A hydrogen bomb would be vastly bigger. And yet, we find that the sheep in Cumbria, Scotland now, North Wales, can't be eaten. The farmers aren't fools. They know very well this is a very serious thing. And it's really making them question whether the government, in fact, is as wise as they say they are.
As the day approaches for the latest Snowball protest, the opposing groups prepare for action.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's a wonderful pleasure to see you all here this evening. And it means an enormous amount to our work to have your support. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but every week seems to be another day in our campaigning lives. This coming week, there is Operation Snowball. And I think you might recall, and you can see the photograph up on the wall there, how at the last Operation Snowball, Families for Defence were out in force at RAF Sculthorpe, where we challenged Monsignor Bruce Kent. We carried that famous banner, "Try cutting the Iron Curtain," and you know what a success that was. This week, all of us will be out there again.
This weekend is the 9th stage of Snowball. Some of you have already taken part in Snowball and some haven't. I don't think you've taken part, Frida. And this is Carol, she hasn't taken part. So maybe if we could share some of the experiences of what we've been through, that'll help them know what's going to happen to them.
I'd quite like to know what happens if you get fined and refuse to pay and go to prison, what that's like.
Well, several things can happen. One of the first things that happens is that you'll have to be called back to court. So you get a letter calling you back to court to say, why haven't you paid your fine? And if it's for reasons, you know, to do with the nuclear issue, you say you just don't feel guilty and you don't want to pay, then several things can happen. One is you could be sent down to prison straight away.
In Cornwall, there's another task. Each protester prepares a statement which they hope will be accepted as evidence at a trial.
I admit the cutting of the fence as a symbolic action, but I plead that it was necessary for me to do this under the Criminal Law Act 1977, Section 3, which enables a person to commit reasonable acts necessary to prevent the commission of a crime.
My defence is that my attempt to saw through a strand of wire with a blunt hacksaw blade cannot be classed as criminal.
Furthermore, I consider the vast sums of money required for their manufacture and storage is a vile misuse of funds when over 15 million children die each year of starvation.
I will be out at Sculthorpe. I know all of you around the country will be passing the message to the people who live in the areas of the air bases. Don't be misguided by these anti-nuclear protesters. So please, let us drink a toast to our future successes. I know that we will continue in the way that we always have done. We never give up, and we will carry on and make sure that the NATO alliance will never be split and will thrive as it always has done. Now, how is the raffle getting on?
Some former servicemen see things rather differently. Air Commodore Alistair Mackey is one of a group of former military men opposed to nuclear weapons. Mackey became an opponent when he was asked as a wing commander to teach nuclear strategy to RAF officers.
I discovered that British nuclear strategy would not stand up in logic. It fell flat on its face if you tried to teach it with a straight face and explain it. It was simply untenable. And what was true 30 years ago is even more true today. What intrigues and fascinates me is the much more important question, which is whether the people inside the nuclear bases are or are not breaking the law, which they very probably are. There is a very long line of international law going back to early in the 19th century, which prohibits internationally the use of weapons that kill thousands of people and do enormous damage out of all proportion to the cause for which the fight is taking place.
The Air Commodore believes that nuclear weapons fall into the same category as weapons like nerve gas, which are banned under international protocols. But are such protocols binding in British law?
Well, there are two objections on international law here. One is it's not clear that international law prohibits the possession of nuclear weapons, so that there is an arguable case as to whether even international law does in fact permit the possession of nuclear weapons. But the second and overriding objection is the great reluctance on the part of British courts to look to international law when deciding cases in this country. The magistrates tend to be completely uninterested. Before a high court, there might be a better chance, but it is a difficult thing to get a high court judge to base a case on international law.
If they did succeed in doing that, what do you think might happen?
I would be surprised were a high court judge to find that the possession of nuclear weapons was a breach of international law.
Even if they lost the legal argument, the Snowball campaigners remain convinced that the moral argument is more important. This weekend, they set out to prove it.
See that old snowball go rolling down the hill. He's getting bigger and stronger every day. Tell all your friends and neighbors, come and push it with a will. And the old snowball will roll your blues. Old snowball's gonna roll that bass away.
The first wire to be cut was in Norfolk at Sculthorpe. Despite her promise to tackle the protesters, Lady Olga Maitland failed to turn up. She preferred to stay in London. The law-breaking started without her.
Sorry? I'd like to stand in this room to do stand and give me evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Wait, come with me.
Snap it in half.
Once an offence is complete, it's dealt with by way of arrest, and they're taken to the nearest police station, and there they're documented and charged in the normal way.
And you would always arrest them?
If the offence warranted it, certainly yes.
And would they all then be charged in due course?
Provided there's sufficient evidence to justify a charge, yes, that would be the case.
I think it's going to cause a lot of problems for the courts. It takes a lot of time to process that number of cases, and if people are defending the cases, it takes a lot more time, and if people go to the Crown Court, as a number of them have, obviously the time is that much greater where you've got a jury trial.
Is it possible for the system finally to cope if things get so large that it could become an embarrassment?
Oh, I think ultimately not, and what the snowballers would hope for, surely, is that if they carry on, at some point in time, it will be impossible for the government to ignore what they're doing.
In Cornwall, Betty Levine has arrived back home from prison just in time to cut the wire again. She joined Liz Baker, John Eschler and Mark Davis on the march to the fence at RAF St Morgan.
What am I? I hope that in the end the government will take notice of what we're doing here and all over the country.
The hacksaw that saved the world. I think those people over there should be with us. They must be with us. They live locally. They're guarding weapons of mass destruction. Watergate Bay just down here with little children playing in the sand.
I'm thinking about what's so awful inside here and how the government have given over... Excuse me. Oh.
My future for a Geiger counter.
I think that I really hate nuclear weapons. I hate American nuclear weapons being on British soil. And I'll continue to cut until they get rid of the paper.
And committing criminal damage to the perimeter defence here at Treble Gate.
After all the heartache leading up to it and the consideration about breaking the law, it was for me a very traumatic moment. But it was a great relief. And it turned out to be quite a joyful moment because at last I was doing something concrete to express my dissatisfaction.
Snowball started with 3 people cutting the wire at one base. This weekend, nearly 300 people cut the wire at 20 bases. At the next protest in October, the numbers may be greater still.
It's a very strange thing, this Snowball campaign. Although it's based upon sort of word of mouth and very slight organisation, or no organisation, it seems to be spreading and accumulating interest and concern, and all sorts of unlikely people are coming down with us and cutting the fence. I just hope somebody is listening.
come and push it with a will. And the old snowball's gonna roll that bass. Old snowball will roll your blues away. First request is to Uncle Sam. We don't wish you any harm. Now and again at the old